The Force Awakens released on December 18th, 2015, and was an instant hit, reaching over $2 billion in the worldwide box office, and after a long drought of waiting, Star Wars was back. Instantly, the speculation, theories, and excitement made its way around the internet. With so many hopes and wonders, the hype was comparable to the time after A New Hope released in 1977. Though taking lots of inspiration from the original film, The Force Awakens still made fans as a whole satisfied and well excited going into the sequel. What was Luke doing on this island? Is Rey related to him? Is Finn going to be a Jedi? What will the Knights of Ren do? So many questions were brought up, which led to an astronomical amount of excitement going into Episode 8. And after what felt like years and years of waiting, The Last Jedi was finally released. And the immediate response from the fandom was, well, interesting. Star Wars The Last Jedi is potentially the most talked about film, at least in modern times. I cannot think of another movie that sparked so much interest so quickly that is backed by both extreme positivity and significant negativity. The film was polarizing.
What the f*** was that? She's a Skywalker! She's using the Force! Get the f*** out of here!
I honestly love this film. Rian Johnson is able to direct this film and please, I'm sure, the vast majority of Star Wars fans.
So Rian Johnson, you done bro! As the Sith Lord says, Order 66, your candy swallows the goal!
If we were able to round up every single Star Wars fan that exists today and ask them the very vague and simple question that is, do you like The Last Jedi? I am willing to bet my entire life savings that the outcome of responses would be a dead 50-50 split. I don't need to make a video on how divisive this movie is, or more so why it was divisive. That discussion has been talked about plenty. We all have our own thoughts and strong opinions on the film, and it feels like anytime you state your personal viewpoint about this, you will cause mass chaos and destruction that leads the world to another global catastrophe. Today's video has nothing to do with my opinion on the film, but rather I wanted to talk about something very, very important that I personally have not seen many discuss. This is how The Last Jedi changed the Star Wars franchise forever. And this goes far beyond the civil war within the fandom and how the Rise of Skywalker was approached by Disney, with J.J. Abrams having about a year and a half to make this $250 million film and being forced, due to crunch, to have his editor edit the film on set while they were shooting. Yeah, it was a mess. We will talk about that later. Let's start off with the initial backlash. It was vibrant, to say the least. We were all there. We all felt the ground splitting into two as the arguing turned into bitter hate, which led to a division amongst the fandom far greater than that of the two sides of American politics. It was not fun being a Star Wars fan. But this harsh backlash resulted in the next Star Wars film not doing so well. I can agree that Solo had plenty of marketing problems, there's no question about that, but you cannot deny that the film's lack of success was partially a consequence of The Last Jedi causing a major shift in the fandom, and more importantly, the general audience. I know us hardcore Star Wars fans love to bicker and fight with one another, but imagine how a general audience member feels when they go to interact with us online or read some comments, and they walk into a virtual war zone. That's probably not so fun for them. At the end of the day, the general audience is who makes or breaks a franchise's success. They account for the large majority of ticket sales. And no, this is not me blaming the fandom for a film's lack of success. There is more to it than that. I'm simply pointing out a specific cause that is a single part in a multivariate analysis. The Last Jedi caused major division and in turn brought down the excitement for Solo and the overall future of the franchise. $393.2 million is terrible for a blockbuster live-action Star Wars movie, especially when compared to the other spin-off film, Rogue One, and its beautiful billion-dollar box office hit. We can also confidently say that Rogue One's major success is a partial result of The Force Awakens doing extremely well, especially with the general audience. Most seem to love the start of the sequel trilogy, and so that hype carried on over to Rogue One, unlike Last Jedi to Solo. The second spin-off Star Wars film failed. What does this mean? Where does Disney go from here? We can now say for a fact that Lucasfilm had many major spin-off films planned and in current works to hit the big screen. We even have a report of Kathleen Kennedy telling Bob Iger that they simply cannot release a new film every year, and that Star Wars needs its time to breathe, that it is being oversaturated. Lucasfilm had many projects planned, and after Solo failed, it seemed all of these were either set aside and put on hold, or some even turned into Disney Plus shows. Obi Wan Kenobi was originally going to be not just a movie, but a trilogy of films. Stuart Beatty, who wrote the first screenplay of the original Kenobi film, revealed this later after the show was released. It was set to be written and filmed by Stephen Daldry in 2017. He revealed that the first film was about Kenobi's journey of surrendering himself to the will of the Force, and a large portion of it made its way into the Disney Plus show, which is actually why he is still credited for episodes 1, 2, 3, and the finale. The second movie would dive into Kenobi accepting the fact that he will have to sacrifice himself for the greater good of the galaxy. The writer explained that Qui-Gon would actually be the leading force within this arc for Obi-Wan. We all love the moment in A New Hope, but Stewart wanted to bring even more emotion and impact to the scene. He said, "There's going to come a moment where you're going to have to sacrifice yourself for the good." And then Obi-Wan is like, "What? No. I'm here to help. I can't." And get him to the point where Obi-Wan has accepted the idea that he's going to die. So Stewart never really gave details of what the third film would encompass, but all he could say is how devastated he was when he found out his screenplay was scrapped. He even brings up that the cast and crew were 100% on board and ready to go at the time. He does confirm that Solo's underperformance was the direct reason for this sudden change in Lucasfilm's direction, stating, "It was just dying to be done. Unfortunately, it was Solo that changed the direction of the system." So you're telling me that we would have had 3 movies about Obi-Wan Kenobi by now if Solo performed well? Yes, that is exactly what I am telling you. Next up on the list, The Book of Boba Fett, or in this case, just Boba Fett. What's interesting about this one is it was scrapped twice. Yes, twice. In 2014, Simon Kinberg was hired on to write this anthology film at that time, which would have been directed by Josh Tank, who ended up making a not so good movie. Yeah, this was quietly set aside. However, in 2018, many reports emerged from the ground up that the film was back in the works, now directed by Logan filmmaker James Mangold, who is actually directing the new Indiana Jones film. Of course, the Boba Fett movie was shelved, and Bob Iger actually confirmed at this time alongside this news in 2020 that there would be a slowdown of Star Wars films, and that certainly is the case. The spin-off movies were not even on hold, they were simply shelved, possibly for good. Lucasfilm clearly did not have any faith in this, and knew something needed to change if Star Wars was going to thrive again. Now, we have many more movies to discuss, but for now, we need to kind of go back to 2019 for the finale and the sequel trilogy. 2 years after The Last Jedi's release, it was still the major talking point in the fandom, and Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker was right around the corner. We were all very hopeful and enthusiastic that this film could potentially bring the fandom back together, but if I'm being honest, I don't think anything could have done that at this point.
Roll it again.
Even if The Rise of Skywalker was a perfect film, far too many would never be able to accept Episode 8 for what it is.
No, you're still holding on. Let go.
But even then, there was a lot of hope in this movie concluding the saga in a successful way. There was actually a lot of hype going into it. Unfortunately, Disney is gonna Disney. Before I get into this, I just need to get this out there. Now, please do not kill me. You can hit dislike if you want, that's fine. But I actually kind of really like The Rise of Skywalker. Yes, it is a hot mess of a film, but I still love it, okay? Can you deal with that? Are we still friends?
Palpa Memes is a Disney show.
Okay, good. So, Disney'd this film, as I like to say. What does this mean? Well, I would need to make an entirely separate video to explain all of this. I mean, there is a whole book JJ could write for the trauma this man has endured during the production of this film, but for now, let's just say JJ Abrams and Chris Terrio had it difficult.
I should open the movie up again. right? Just do it. Just tell them you're changing
I'm
all
gonna
the
call Bob.
prints.
I just need one more week of reshoots.
One more. Just do that.
Not only were they hired on to create the conclusion of a 40-year saga, a rather heavy task, and that the previous film was hated by half its audience, and that they needed to somehow find a way to make this story work, but were also given an astronomically low amount of time to do this. After Colin Trevorrow, who is the original writer and director of Episode 9, after he was fired in 2017, J.J. Abrams was hired back to somehow make this work. JJ was eager to be back, of course, but knew a difficult task was ahead of him, so he personally called up Zack Snyder's Justice League writer Chris Terrio to help co-write the film. As we see from old concept art, the movie was actually it started out very similar to Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates, with Coruscant playing a somewhat heavy role in this film, but after lots of studio changes, rewrites, and of course, forced reshoots in summer of 2019, the film became drastically different from what Abrams had originally intended. Writer Chris Terrio even explains in an interview that he wished deeply that the film was given 2 movies, and that there was so much left behind in the theatrical release. I could go on about the crunch they dealt with, but if I'm being honest, the worst part about all this that is very heartbreaking is that the film was cut down significantly. I mean, I can tell you confidently that this film at one point originally opened up with the Luke and Leia training scene, which of course was much longer. And of course, there's a lot I'm not supposed to talk about because, people could get in trouble if I do, so I'm not going to do that. But, it would just have to get its own separate video. Maybe I'll do it at some point. But reading it all and seeing some pictures of sets and lots of concept art that made it into filming and whatnot, and a lot of story changes that happened, it's just super disappointing that we do not have this original cut. I know it's not finished. I know there is a lot of VFX work that needs to be done, and that seemed to be the main reason why it was cut, is because the lack of time given to this film, despite them asking for more time to Bob Iger and then Bob Iger denying. But hey, maybe they could at least release these deleted scenes.
It was actually a conversation between Rey and Finn. They actually talked it out. There was a scene where Rey already knew, like he had stopped her in the Falcon and was gonna let her know that he had the Force. He had felt it ever since he left the First Order. Like that energy, that was the motivating factor, and he's known it for a very long time. And Rey, in that scene, Rey stopped him and said, "Finn, I knew for a long time, like since the moment I met you, that you were strong with the Force. I knew there was something about you." Maybe that would be, I don't even know if that's in the. Did we even film? Yeah, we did film that.
Oh, so did you guys shoot that?
Yeah, I think we did.
On a simple objective level alone, it improves the film in so many ways. Yeah, the somehow Palpatine returned line? Yeah, I wonder if that was a part of the summer reshoots that they had to make. I don't know. So do I think we'll ever see this sort of director's cut or assembly cut, whatever you want to call it? And to be honest, I have no idea at this point. I know a decent amount of people at Lucasfilm want to see these scenes put back in. Chris Terrio's non-disclosure agreement for this film should end soon, maybe in 2023. So maybe I can get an interview with him or something. I don't know. I'd just have him spill everything. Tell me everything, Chris. So, like The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker once again did not sit well with a large portion of the fandom. And here we are at the end of 2019, The Mandalorian Season 1 releases, and becomes an instant hit. There isn't a whole lot to say about this particular season, other than it shocked the world, and the beautiful Baby Yoda merchandise money that Disney made was probably stacked up to the moon. It was everywhere. It was a huge success. This hype led on to The Mandalorian Season 2, but the way this season was approached was a bit different. It's pretty clear the intentions Lucasfilm had when it came to this season. The fandom was a broken mess, and the future for Star Wars wasn't looking so bright. With the harsh backlash of the sequel trilogy and no Star Wars movies in sight, along with a significant number of movie directors let go and fired, the excitement for the franchise was dim.
I gotta be real, I haven't had that much fun talking about Star Wars lately for the past few years. The newer films have really divided the fandom. Some people love them, some people hate them. I've liked some and disliked others, and it's just not really that fun to talk about Star Wars anymore because it always ends up with varying opinions and people want to talk about what they love or what they hate, and it just feels like the fun isn't there.
So, with The Mandalorian Season 2, Lucasfilm knows they need to bring a spark back into the fandom, and they did just that, with 2 people, Dave Filoni, and Jon Favreau. The entire season was filled with beloved characters and honestly, in my opinion, a pretty good story arc about found family and letting go of the things you love even if it hurts you, but knowing it is for the best. It overall was a fantastic season. I really loved it. Seeing Ahsoka Tano, Bo-Katan, Dark Troopers, and of course my favorite character in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, was great. And every week fans were speculating and getting hyped over what's to come in the next episode, and while the fan service definitely took the spotlight, I gotta say the story itself was pretty well executed. Fans loved it, but shortly after the finale, the fan arguments over The Last Jedi resurfaced once again. So many controversies surrounding Luke Skywalker were brought back. This is how Luke Skywalker should have been in the sequel trilogy. No, this is just an action figure version of Luke, blah blah blah. It seemed like things were finally growing positively within the fandom as the season progressed, but it only took one episode, or really just one scene, to bring things down again. But despite the continuous arguments, the hype and love of the season carried swiftly along the fandom. But even though we mostly loved it, a certain question started going around. Is this what the future for Star Wars holds? This question became extensively brought up when the future of Star Wars was revealed. December 10th, 2020. Obi Wan Kenobi, bringing back Hayden Christensen, Ahsoka Tano, Boba Fett, Lando, Cassian Andor, so many fan favorite characters getting their own spin-off show. The excitement was unreal. Star Wars was back and we were all extremely joyful. But quickly after the initial hype took off, we started questioning if this is the correct path Star Wars needs to take. I mean, fan service is good if executed properly. You see, I look at fan service a lot like dessert. You have your main course and you hope it is well made and nutritious. And afterwards, you might have a little dessert to top everything off. What you shouldn't want is your entire meal to be filled with nothing but desserts and sweets. Not only is it extremely unhealthy for you, but it ends up not even being enjoyable because it's your entire meal. There's nothing special about it. The Mandalorian Season 2 was filled with fan service, but it was service that served the story in a meaningful and fulfilling way. Now, after the Book of Boba Fett released, the speciality sort of went away. Not only was the show a big letdown for most of the fans, but fan service was just forcefully thrown in, which in turn led to the consequence of no one even really caring about the title character, Boba Fett. We all turned directly to Ahsoka Tano and Luke Skywalker and Grogu and the novelty of everything and how crazy the deepfake technology has gotten. It felt like the creators of this show knew that fans wouldn't really be satisfied with the foundation of it, and in result decided to throw in some Mandalorian spice over everything. The problem with this is it was thrown over everything. The main consequence of this for me personally is the undoing of the Mandalorian Season 2's plot. What was the point of Season 2? Well, overall it was for Din Djarin to get his son Grogu to a Jedi. This was needed due to Baby Yoda being in constant danger, along with him needing to fulfill his destiny as a potential Jedi. What does Book of Boba Fett do? It pretty much completely erases this. Instead of Luke Skywalker giving Grogu the ability to have a deep connection with his adopted father, he basically slaps him in the face and says, "You cannot have attachments. Attachments are forbidden." Which does not make a whole lot of sense considering Luke's journey and arc in the original trilogy was founded upon his attachments and love for his father and friends. I just was not a fan of this decision, and while I am still excited for Mandalorian Season 3, I feel things would be more intriguing and interesting had Grogu still been away from Din Djarin and instead with Luke Skywalker still. It would leave open a greater mysterious aspect to it. It just seems like Disney or Lucasfilm, Dave or John, whoever it was worried that having a season of Mandalorian without Baby Yoda would ultimately hurt the general audience's interest. But from what I can tell, the Book of Boba Fett did just that. Obi Wan Kenobi came out shortly after, and the reaction to the show was mixed. It's honestly hard to tell what the overall fan reception is of this show. The writing was certainly not perfect, and it had a criminally low budget. I mean, who would have guessed that She-Hulk would get a higher budget than Obi Wan Kenobi? I will forever be baffled by this decision. And knowing that it could have made its way to the big screen 3 times, it just is heartbreaking. But what has been made clear throughout all this is the lack of a dedicated and confident plan. With the high number of fired directors, tossing away of scripts, and the egregious Star Wars movie announcements that no one ever believes anymore simply because of how many are scrapped or shelved due to creative differences, it's clear something needs to change. We were supposed to get Rogue Squadron this year. That was pushed back to 2023, and now it appears to have been shelved, and Patty Jenkins has moved on to other projects, leaving the film sitting around in the dust somewhere in Lucasfilm. Then we have Taika Waititi's film. I'm not going to say it was shelved, but the production has been stuck in stagnation, which is never a good sign, and Taika himself has said he doesn't even know if the movie will ever get made. He's still working on the script. Then, of course, Rian Johnson's trilogy. Announced back in 2017, this trilogy had a set plan and goal, but after The Last Jedi happened, they softly set this aside. Johnson is asked about the trilogy in nearly every interview, and the answer is always the same: I hope so. And finally, to modern day. Today is December 11th, 2022, and the latest Star Wars Disney Plus show, Andor, just finished. It was phenomenal. Easily the best written Star Wars live-action show, in my opinion. But the upsetting thing about this is barely anyone watched it. Besides the hardcore fan base who actually tried to bring the general audience in, the show simply did not perform well. Despite its critical acclaim, this still was not enough to bring a large portion of the audience in. The show was phenomenal, I loved it, but it is currently the lowest viewed live-action Star Wars show, which is super upsetting. With all this said, as a huge lover of Star Wars and a fan since I was like 2 years old watching The Phantom Menace, it certainly is a bit depressing seeing where things have gone. With so much potential, so many story opportunities, I'll always have hope that one day things will turn around. With the major news of Bob Iger taking back his role of CEO as Disney, who knows where things are gonna go. Maybe, just maybe, we will get a film in 2025. Only time will tell. Star Wars has been a roller coaster of ups and downs. There's so much I love and so much I don't. That's how we all are. The Last Jedi remains the most divisive film in the franchise, which sparked a domino effect of issues. And at the end of the day, we are all fans. Despite our constant arguing and disagreements, we all have one goal in mind: for Star Wars to thrive. Will we ever see this again? Now, I am an optimistic person, so I want to say yes. One day things will turn around. One day Star Wars will be on top of the world like it was when A New Hope came out, when The Phantom Menace first released, and when The Force Awakens premiered. Star Wars being in a drought is not a new situation. We all have been through this many times, and I am confident that we will get through this. Some might say this is naive of me, but I say history proves that things can and will turn around. All it takes is a spark of creativity, confidence, and execution. I really hope you enjoyed this video and kind of viewpoint from the outside in on the Star Wars franchise. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please hit like if you liked it or dislike if you disliked it. Comment your thoughts down below. Thank you guys, and I will see you all in the next one. Thank you for watching.